Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Liverpool. Liverpool. I actually don't follow football, European football, but my father's from Liverpool. So by proxy, that makes me a Liverpool fan. And it's beautiful to see them win. Today's video is going to be about, and you've seen the title, do not trivialize good things. Most of what this means is abstinence, unfortunately. That's not a fun answer. Oh, shit. There we go. Seeking squalor, toilet umbrellas, and champagne chandeliers. Buy it on Amazon. Bam! What this usually means is abstinence, and that's not a fun answer. When you tell somebody, drink less, smoke less, fuck less, gamble less, smile less, laugh less. That nobody wants to hear that. We have this notion that we should just always be happy. And there's a degree of infantilization that happens in the West, especially in the United States, where we are sort of encouraged to the point of self-destruction to retain certain childlike behavior that we should really very consciously get rid of. Additionally, there's no consideration of what's enough. There's no such thing as enough. There should always be more, right? You can always laugh harder. You can always have another drink. You can always have something that's sweeter, something that's saltier, a little bit more fat. Oh, if that meat was a little bit more meaty. At a certain point, you have to say enough is enough in order for what you have to be enough. But now, I mean, let's take sex, for example, all right? And you can pick your poison, drinking, drugs, anything. It should be novel. It should be something that's novel. It should be a novel experience. Even if you're sleeping with your long-term partner, and maybe you guys fuck like rabbits, it should still be something that feels special. And whether we were talking about sex or drugs or anything else, if you're doing it enough where you're starting to lose the effect, that's how you know that you're doing it too much. And you need to dial it way back, way the fuck back. You know, one of the most famous, one of the things that everyone knows about weed, at least, is the notion of a tolerance break. Because you can build a tolerance for marijuana really quickly, and then you can lose the tolerance really quickly. And so people who smoke every day, like, you know, hardcore stoners, they'll take a tolerance break of 48 hours, which seems totally trivial. But from the perspective of that stoner, it will make the world of difference. And, you know, I suppose it's part of maturing if you're a stoner. And this is what I've observed in stoners, is that as you get older, you stop trying to smoke more and instead you smoke less so that you can get more high. It's completely out of whack. It's not intuitive. You have to have experience doing these things in order to understand it. But everybody knows that when you go too deeply, right? If you, let's say that you love pizza, go work at a pizzeria. You will very quickly stop loving pizza when you're wrist deep in dough and cheese all day, every day. And you're eating pizza for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. Now, you might still love cheese, or might still love pizza, rather, as a concept, but the physical reality there in front of your face, maybe not so much. And I actually think there's a lot of doomerism about pornography going around, which it totally deserves. Pornography is incredibly destructive, and I, like most young men who grew up with the internet, I definitely had an unhealthy relationship with it when I was younger. But it's funny to grow into who I've become now, because now I don't feel anything. Of course, I haven't been I haven't been a consumer of pornography in many years. But of course, you see pornography every now and then. And it's been really weird to know that it had such an intense effect on me back in the day. And now I literally feel nothing. Apathy. And a lot of people feel a sense of like indignation or disgust or something along these lines when it comes to pornography. I actually think that that's not appropriate. Similar to gambling. People who have a problem with gambling, they'll often try to fight their gambling problems by demonizing gambling, by saying, I hate this, it's terrible, it's bad. But the problem there is you're still having a strong emotional reaction. And I think the healthiest place to get to is get to a place where you feel nothing. I'm not a gambler. I've never been a gambler. I feel nothing. Whether I win or lose, it effectively has no bearing on my emotional state. And so let's say that you have, let's take the whole idea of addiction off the table. I'm not a big fan of the concept of addiction. I believe in physical addiction. That does exist. But frankly, I don't believe in psychological addiction. And even with the most hardcore drugs, I remember learning this in a psych class I took where we spent like a whole semester just studying brain chemistry. Even with things like heroin and methamphetamine, you have to do these drugs habitually for weeks before your brain actually expects, before you've changed your brain chemistry enough where your brain expects the drug. Then, and only then, can you accurately say that you have what I would call an addiction. But up until that point, anything that you would claim as an addiction is just a failure of character. And so, and that obvious, I appreciate how that sounds. Okay. I have plenty of experience around addicts. I appreciate that some people are going to hear that and they're going to get really upset because they have experience around addicts. And I appreciate how bad it can be. And I appreciate that it's not all just like a failure of character, but at a certain point, you're a fucking adult, right? You've got bills and you've got children to feed. Maybe you shouldn't be at the craps table. At a certain point, we have to blame the individual. We have to. But anyway, so back to sex. So what I was going to say is what we often scrutinize and criticize in people is the negative association with promiscuity, for example. From the perspective of the potential partner. So we're not even going to assign genders. We have one partner who is very promiscuous, another potential partner who is not promiscuous. The partner who is not promiscuous is completely valid in the assumption that this person has, through the decisions that they've made, trivialized sex. And sex is one of the least trivial things in the entire human experience. So it makes sense that throughout history, those people have been pariahs, the extremely promiscuous people, because why would a willing partner want somebody who has trivialized something that will be, or at least should be, one of the most important parts of their relationship? And now you can apply that to obviously everything. Your brain needs the concept of normality. And I didn't just fuck up okay, good. Sometimes I hit buttons on the keyboard accidentally and I just check my recording. Your brain needs to return to a state of normality. And the crazy fluctuations between sobriety and substance abuse, and I consider like gambling, that's abusing the dopamine receptors in your brain. You want to get that high from winning. And that's why I lump gambling and sex and drugs, all of it, into the same basket. What you're really doing is you're abusing your dopaminergic system. And if you're not extremely conscious about the reality of existing at baseline and how important it is to exist at baseline in order to accurately appreciate the high, then you're doing it wrong. And you're going down a path that is inevitably going to be a disaster. What I wrote here is an often misunderstood part of dopamine abuse, addiction, substance abuse, whatever you want to call it. It must come packaged with the acknowledgement of accessibility. A great comparison that I love to make is gambling versus pornography. We would all agree that gambling is more destructive on the individual basis. An individual person who has a gambling problem Gambling is going to be a route toward destruction at a much more severe and accelerated pace. The problem is that we can't just look at individuals, we have to look at society. And we have to ask ourselves, what are the barriers to entry in order to abuse your dopaminergic system with one of these things? Literally everybody, even children, have phones in their pockets, which means effectively 100% of the population has unlimited access to pornography from childhood. Whereas gambling, first and foremost, you have to first have the money to gamble, or at least have the credit, which implies that you're at least an adult. It doesn't always require that you're an adult. Obviously, there are shady websites where they prove your age by pressing a button. But most gamblers won't gamble on an empty stomach, right? Most gamblers, if it's the choice between living in a cardboard box under a bridge and gambling, they're going to not choose to gamble and instead continue to be housed. As opposed to like fentanyl addicts, they're happy to live under a bridge because fentanyl is more important to them than having a home. So, gamblers generally don't gamble on empty stomachs or living in cardboard boxes. So there's so many more. There's radically more barriers to entry to becoming a gambling addict than there is to becoming a porn addict. Now, imagine that we chart or graph all the ways that you can abuse your dopaminergic system. You got heroin and cheeseburgers and prostitutes and whatever else you can turn into an addiction. The risk profile, in my opinion, is dramatically higher for items with the lowest barrier to entry. Porn and cheeseburgers have effectively zero barriers. And that's why countless millions of Americans are addicted to porn and most Americans are fat. Whereas fentanyl is radically more dangerous on a per-use basis, it will never outcompete heart disease. The deep-fried cheese will always kill more people than fentanyl because the idea of taking a regular person and having them go through all the steps required in order for them to get fentanyl, obviously we're not talking about mistakes here, somebody buying a bag of weed that has fentanyl in it, which is exceptionally rare, is basically a myth. Drug dealers don't give away free drugs, okay? I know that we've all been hearing that since we were kids, but it's just not the way that works. So I asked GPT for some stats here. 73,000 people died from synthetic opioids, mostly fentanyl, but 700,000 people died from heart disease. I presume that this was 1 year. So literally 10 times more people died from heart disease. But what kind of risk profile do we associate with cheeseburgers? Hardly any, almost none. Whereas fentanyl, we profile it as so dangerous that, and again, I'm not saying that it's not, but if you compare heroin to alcohol, for example, heroin's more destructive, alcohol's more prolific. But alcoholics outnumber junkies 30-1. If we doubled the number of junkies that we have in this country tomorrow, almost nobody in the country would notice. But if we doubled the amount of alcoholics we have, the fucking society would grind to a halt. Suddenly the guy driving the bus is an alcoholic, the guy operating the crane is an alcoholic, the guy who's supposed to be fixing the sewer system is an alcoholic, and he fucking passes out and falls into the drain. The proliferation and access to ways in which you can abuse your dopaminergic system, I've always felt is as, if not more important. And I am a subject matter expert. Go ahead and read my book if you want my credentials, okay? I've done almost every drug known to man. I've abused almost every drug known to man, and I've never been addicted. But that's because it's just not, it just doesn't appeal to me that much. Women and food are the things that I struggle to say no to. But, I'm constantly hearing people talk about addiction and the destructive qualities of dopaminergic abuse, but it's always spoken about in absolutes. It's always spoken about from the perspective of the individual. And at the end of the day, almost nobody is going to be exposed to the more extreme things. Almost 0% of the population will be exposed to fentanyl in their life. Almost 0% will be exposed to heroin in their life or methamphetamine. Almost 0% of the population will have a problem with gambling. But a huge, probably the majority of the population struggles to drive past McDonald's without at least feeling something like, I would love a fucking cheeseburger right now. And obviously there's factors at play here. McDonald's stands to make a lot of money. so McDonald's doesn't want you thinking about the destructive potential of it. But I'm not even being that pessimistic. I just think that it's similar to sharks and vending machines. Vending machines fall on people and crush them to death all the fucking time. But nobody thinks a vending machine is dangerous. Everyone thinks a shark is dangerous, but almost nobody gets eaten by sharks. And so I think that this is one of those areas where we as a society need to begin. Oh, that's what I was going to say. Okay. Shit, that took me a moment to remember. The final thought. And this is one of those rare instances where I used to say this as a kid. And I don't know if you guys have memories like this where you just had some insight as a child that was impressive. And I remember as a kid saying this to adults, and adults always being like, what the this is how does a child have this type of message? But it's because I grew up in a place where, and this I'm sure is the case for the majority of public school students in the country, you can get any drug you can imagine. Probably all the way down to middle school, but certainly high school and college student in the country can acquire literally any drug you can think of as easily as just turning to the person next to them in class. Hey, you got some of that shit? I need it. And yeah, here, I got it right here. Here you go. It's really that easy. And this is what I used to tell adults when I would overhear them having this conversation about the destruction of kids these days, et cetera, et cetera. I would say, first of all, you guys should be proud because every single day, every student in the country effectively chooses not to throw their life away with drugs because it's right there in front of them. It's readily available with zero effort, zero barrier to entry. Every student in the country actively chooses not to throw their life away. And when we talk about places like Amsterdam, or I think Oregon recently, I think this year or last year, made everything decriminalized, I think it gives so much validity to those types of policies because, and it's so ironic that a room full of stuffy old people are sitting around wringing their hands like, people aren't responsible enough to just legalize everything. And I'm in the background like, hey, I'm 15 years old. I'm in high school. 100% of my peers have access to every drug imaginable, and 99% of them choose not to do these drugs. That's incredible. That's something that we should be proud of as a society. We should. Every single parent who's sending a child to a public school right now or a private school, they probably just have more expensive drugs. If your kid isn't a junkie, your kid actively chose not to be. They certainly were, maybe if they weren't offered, it was certainly available. They certainly know the person who they could ask for it, and they choose not to be. That's something to be really proud of, and it's really commendable. And it's a demonstration of sort of a societal level of maturity and responsibility that I really appreciate. Anyway, that's it for today. Please subscribe and let me know in the comment section down below what kind of experiences you've had with addiction. I know that this channel is a little bit all over the place, and that's just the way it is. It's going to be mostly tech and software stuff, but every now and then I'm going to throw in a video like this. I hope you like it. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.